The library at Whitmore High was old. Not charming old or ivy-draped old, just old. The kind of old that settled into your bones, the kind that made the lights flicker even when the weather was fine. With yellowed wallpaper peeling at the corners and heavy bookshelves that groaned under the weight of forgotten tomes, it didn't try to be warm. It wasn't warm. It was always too quiet, too still, like the room was waiting for something or someone to fill the silence. Ellie Hart, 17 and chronically curious, preferred it that way. Most students avoided the library unless they had to be there, but not Ellie. It was her refuge from the clatter of high school life. She liked the solitude, the whispered hum of the overhead lights, and the way the shelves seemed to form their own kind of labyrinth. But even Ellie, who considered herself unshakable, couldn't explain the sound she heard that Wednesday afternoon. She had been in the back corner of the nonfiction section, halfway through skimming Psychology of Fear, when she heard it. A sharp, deliberate click, like a heel striking the linoleum floor. Then another click, click. She froze. The sound didn't fit. The school had a strict no-heel policy for students, and the librarian, Miss Geller, wore soft orthopedic flats. The janitor shuffled in old sneakers. The floor was only that loud if someone wanted to be heard. She leaned around the bookshelf. The aisles were empty. "Hello?" Ellie called out, softly at first, then a bit louder. No answer. No footsteps either. Just that static quiet. Maybe she'd imagined it. She was reading about fear, after all. But then, click, 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 click. Closer this time. Not fast, not running, just walking. As if whoever or whatever it was knew exactly where they were going. Ellie's heartbeat stumbled. She tucked the book under her arm and walked slowly toward the noise. Her sneakers made only the faintest sound, almost respectful in that heavy silence. As she turned the corner, she expected something. A figure, a prank, a misplaced pair of heels abandoned as a joke. But the aisle was empty. Still, the noise persisted. Click, click, click. Now from behind her. She spun, her breath catching. Again, no one. The hair on her arms rose. She ducked between shelves, moving quickly now, eyes darting to the gaps between books, to the reflective glass of the fire extinguisher case. She caught her own wide eyes in it, haunted, pale. And still, the sound continued. Always near, always just out of reach. By the time she reached the front desk, the sound had stopped. Miss Geller looked up from her desk, pushing her glasses up with a slow, deliberate motion. "You all right, Ellie?" Ellie hesitated. Did you hear that?" Miss Geller frowned. Hear what?" "Heels. Someone walking through the stacks." "No one's been in or out since you got here," the librarian said, almost too casually. "Just you and me." That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. The sound haunted her thoughts, as sharp and distinct as it had been in the library. She tried to logic it away. Maybe it was the pipes, or her imagination, or the building settling, but she had felt it. The next day, she returned to the library with a notebook. She sat in the same seat and waited. Nothing happened. No steps, no clicking, no disembodied footfalls. Until the bell rang and she stood to leave. Click. Just one. Behind her. She turned around slowly. Nothing. But this time, there was something new. On the floor near the shelf, a single scuff mark. Fresh. Black. The size of a heel. She crouched down, brushing her fingers over it. Not dust. Not old. Her notebook dropped to the ground as a cold gust rushed through the aisle, despite the fact that no window was open and no vent was nearby. The next week, things escalated. Students began whispering. It started with Kayla from yearbook, saying she saw someone in a red coat disappear behind the stacks. But when she followed, no one was there. Then Sean, the senior who claimed he didn't believe in ghosts, was found locked in the supply closet, hyperventilating and refusing to speak. And then there was Kara, who said she heard humming in the library bathroom, a low, tuneless melody that stopped when she turned the faucet on. Every time, it was Ellie who went back to investigate, and every time, she heard it again. The clicking, the pacing, following, always at the edge of vision, always out of reach. She started digging into the library's history. There wasn't much online, just a few archive clippings about renovations in the early 2000s. But she found something odd buried in the microfilm archives of the school paper. A headline. Student disappears from library. No clues left behind. It was dated 1989. The girl's name was Lorraine Markham. She was a junior, last seen in the library during her free period. No signs of struggle, no explanation, just vanished. Rumors at the time suggested she ran away, but the article ended with a chilling line. The last thing anyone remembers was the sound of her heels as she walked behind the stacks and never came back. Ellie sat alone in her bedroom, the glow of her laptop casting shadows across her poster and bookshelves. The scanned article about Lorraine Markham remained open on her screen. Disappeared in 1989. No witnesses, no evidence, just gone. Ellie searched Lorraine's name. No obituaries, no photos, nothing beyond that article. Like the girl had been swallowed whole, not just by the library, but by time itself. She found the school's old yearbooks in the local historical archive and spent Saturday morning flipping through the pages. Finally, in the 1989 edition, she found Lorraine. She was easy to miss. A quiet presence in the background of club photos, drama club, library aide, junior editor, always on the edge of a crowd. But in one photo, Lorraine was front and center. She wore a red coat, long, structured, elegant, a stark contrast to the drab uniforms of her classmates. Ellie stared at the image for a long time. goosebumps rising as she noticed what no one else had ever mentioned. Lorraine was wearing black heels. And they looked loud. Miss Geller raised an eyebrow when Ellie asked to see the old storage records. That stuff's all boxed up in Archive Room B, off limits to students. I know, Ellie said, trying to sound casual, but I'm writing something for the school paper, a retro piece. It's for Miss Draycott's journalism elective. Miss Geller gave her a long, unreadable look, then finally handed over a key. 20 minutes. No touching the blue files. Archive Room B was more of a crypt than a room. Dust hung in the air like fog, and the light above flickered unevenly. Ellie's flashlight beam darted across metal shelves and battered boxes. Most were unlabeled, but one caught her eye. Missing Student Case, 1989. She opened it. Inside was a faded attendance log, Lorraine's handwritten book checkout slip, and a dusty unlabeled cassette tape in a cracked plastic case. With a trembling hand, Ellie slipped it into her portable player, one she used for her retro reviews blog. The static came first, then silence, then click, click, click. Her breath hitched. The same deliberate heel tapping. Steady. Slow. Then, layered faintly beneath the sound, a whisper. Low, indecipherable, but rhythmic. Like someone repeating the same sentence over and over in a hushed voice. Ellie played the recording again. This time, she pressed the player against her ear. Still here. Still here. Still here. On Monday, Ellie returned to the library before school began. She walked the aisles deliberately, stopping where she found the scuff mark. It was gone. But there was something else now. A single red thread, caught in the edge of the lower bookshelf. She picked it up and rolled it between her fingers. Not string, fabric, wool, like from a coat, a red coat. That afternoon, she confronted Miss Geller. Do you remember Lorraine Markham? The librarian paused for a long time, then said quietly, You should stop looking into this. Why? Miss Geller's lips tightened. Sometimes silence is safer. That night, Ellie snuck back into the school. She knew the library's back window had a weak latch. She climbed through it just before midnight, heart pounding. The air was different at night. The stillness was oppressive, pressing down on her shoulders. The ceiling lights were off, but the emergency glow strips along the baseboards cast a pale greenish hue across the room. She stood in the center of the main aisle and waited. Click. She turned. Nothing. Click. Click. She raised her phone, filming now. The clicking moved, circling her, and then she saw it. Just for a split second. A figure, slim, wearing a red coat, walking slowly behind the row of encyclopedias. She ran toward it, but there was no one there. Only a whisper behind her ear, close enough to feel breath that wasn't there. You hear me now. The next day, Ellie showed her best friend Mia the video. There's nothing there, Mia said, squinting. No, look, right there, the red blur. You can see it. Mia frowned. Elle, you need sleep. You're obsessed. and it's starting to freak people out. Ellie felt the distance forming, but she couldn't stop. Not now. She returned to Archive Room B. This time, she opened the files Miss Geller had told her not to touch. The blue ones. Inside were records of other incidents. 1995. A sophomore locked in a reading closet for hours claimed to hear footsteps circling him. 2003. A teacher quit after reporting whispering voices whenever she entered the history aisle. 2017. A janitor found unconscious near the reference desk. Mild concussion, couldn't explain what happened. None of these reports had ever been filed officially. None had ever made it to the paper. The blue folder wasn't just off limits, it was buried. And at the bottom of the stack, a photograph. Lorraine Markham standing in the library, taken just a week before she vanished. Ellie turned it over. A note was scribbled on the back in fading pen. Some voices get trapped in places and forget how to let them go. Ellie returned to the library one last time, alone, phone recording, notebook in hand. She walked to the back where the forgotten books lived, dusty volumes that hadn't been touched in years. She stood still. Click, click. Her breath shook. Click, click, click. The sound was circling her again. Lorraine? Ellie whispered. Everything stopped, and then books began to fall. One by one, down each aisle, the whisper rose again. You hear me now. A shadow moved just ahead, closer this time. Ellie frowned. Through the aisles, past the desk, into the darkness of the supply hallway. At the very end, a mirror. Tall, cracked, covered with a cloth. She stepped closer, lifted the sheet. Lorraine stood in the reflection. Not Ellie. Lorraine. She was still 17, still wearing the red coat, still in black heels. Her eyes met Ellie's, and she smiled. Just once. Sadly. You hear me now, she whispered. But they never did. The lights overhead burst. The mirror shattered. Ellie staggered back, but when she looked again, the mirror was whole. Her own reflection stared back. Lorraine was gone. But the sound remained. Click, click, click. They say the library is haunted now. Students whisper about hearing footsteps when they're alone, about seeing red just out of the corner of their eyes, about whispers in empty corners. But the library isn't haunted. It's listening. And somewhere deep between the stacks, if you stand still enough and stay quiet, you might hear it. The sound of black heels walking behind you. And a voice. You hear me now.